Welcome back. It is episode 3 of Craft and Crime. And this month I am going to be talking about Jerry Brudos, who kind of a disturbing guy. I guess all the guys that I've talked about so far have been disturbing, but that's kind of what it is. I'm going to be attempting something a little different this month. I am going to be trying to make this middle pencil cup out of a mason jar. And I'm ultimately going to be doing 2 because I'm making holiday presents for a couple of my teacher friends, but I don't know how they're going to turn out. So I bought acrylic paint from Target. Hopefully that's the right kind of paint. And I brought paintbrushes and paint markers. And I have zero clue how a paint marker works. So it should be interesting. But I'm going to start off by taping off where the eraser is going to be, because I think that makes the most sense. So while I try to figure that out, I will introduce you to Jerry Brudos. Jerry was born Jerome Henry Brudos in South Dakota on January 31st of 1939. His family already had 2 sons, and unfortunately, his mother had really had her hopes set on a daughter. And Jerry was not a daughter, so that was upsetting to her. And she ended up being resentful of Jerry for not being the daughter that she had hoped for. So she was abusive, emotionally, and occasionally physically. And it really caused him some issues with women. He was going to grow up to not be super fond of women, which is something that we've kind of seen in the other guys. When they've had bad experiences with their moms, they tend to kind of take that out on the rest of womankind. I can't tell if that's equal. Also, tape is not... This is round and tape is flat, and I just don't really know. I don't really know if this is going to work. It definitely doesn't look like a straight line. But you know what? It's the thought that counts. So I'm working on the eraser, so I'm going to get some of my pink cherry blossom paint, and I have nothing to put it on, so I'm going to put it on this empty pen thing. Anyways, so he had a rough upbringing, and when he was 5 years old, he for some reason was at the town dump, which seems a little odd, but he was at the dump and he found a woman's shoe. And kids are curious, so he brought the woman's shoe home and tried it on, as kids will do. And his mother found him wearing the shoe, and she was furious. She did not want her son to be experimenting with dressing up as a woman, even though he was 5, and doesn't seem like it's a huge deal, but she wasn't happy. She destroyed the shoes. She was terrible to him. Bad experience. Still at 5, he at school took his teacher's shoe. She had for some reason taken it off, and it was under her desk, and she did not react negatively. She just kind of, teachers, we're kind of used to weird things happening. So she did not react negatively and just kind of laughed it off as kids being kids. So he had these two very contrasting reactions to his shoe thing. I'm not sure if you can call it a fetish when they're 5. He was just intrigued by them. So that obsession with feminine shoes continued to get stronger, and as a teenager, he occasionally stalked and attacked women in order to take their shoes, and he began to build a collection of shoes, particularly high-heeled shoes. At 17 years old, he kidnapped another 17-year-old. I'm not sure, it didn't say if they knew each other, but she was also 17, and I'm gonna start painting. Here we go. And it was at a relatively public location. I think they said it was like at a park. He attacked her, kidnapped her, forced her to remove her clothing, beat her up, and threatened to stab her if she didn't go along with what he wanted her to do, which was basically some icky sex stuff. Fortunately enough, there happened to be a couple of older folks going on a walk, and they interrupted the attack and called the police, and he was arrested. However, he was only 17, so not old enough to go to like jail. So instead of taking him to jail, he spent 9 months in the psych ward at Oregon State Hospital. And while he was there, he openly spoke of his fantasies of kidnapping women to use as sex slaves and keeping them in an undisclosed location. He had this like idea of keeping them in a cave. Anyways, disturbing, right? So he was pretty open about these fantasies. I don't know if he like didn't realize that they weren't necessarily something that everybody felt. Maybe he thought that this was like a normal way to feel, or maybe he didn't care. So there's the pink. It doesn't look good. I'm going to do multiple coats. Either way, the doctors weren't as shocked as you would expect them to have been. They said that they figured, oh, well, it's just a 17-year-old who is not adjusting to adolescence the same way most kids do. And they even decided that he was not likely to be a violent person, which I don't want to be super critical because I'm not a doctor. You know, I don't know what I would do in this situation, but I have a feeling they probably felt pretty bad because he ends up not being a good guy. Anyway, after he was released from there, he graduated high school like normal in 1957 and went on to become an electronics technician, which is going to be kind of important later on because of the electronics part. So, in 1961, he married a young woman named Darcy. So, let's see. He was born in 39. So, in 59, he would have been 20. So, he's 22, 23. And he marries Darcy, who is 17. Which, I guess, I mean, that seems crazy now, but I know people got married young back in the day. And they would end up having 2 children. But he had some pretty bizarre rules that he made Darcy follow. Actually, everybody at one point. To start, Darcy. I'm assuming this is before they had kids but he would make Darcy remain naked when she would be around the house. So doing household things, she would be naked. And then after they had kids, his mother moved in with them. And at that point, he forbid anyone from entering certain rooms of his house. So it ended up being that these rooms of the house were where he was keeping some rather strange things. He had a paperweight that was shaped like a breast, which will come into play a little bit later. And he also had women's clothing and shoes that he had stolen from people's houses. He was doing these like nighttime breaking in to people's houses, stealing things. And it's thought that he may have also attacked and raped women during those break-ins. Obviously, his crimes are escalating. He has been committing crimes since a young age, and it's getting worse. So, we're going to be at his first victim. His first victim was Linda Slauson. She was 19 years old, and on January 26th of 1968, she had the unfortunate occurrence of knocking on Jerry Brutos's door to sell encyclopedias. She was a door-to-door encyclopedia salesperson. He lured her into his house, and at some point sent his family out to have burgers at the local fast food place and lured her down into the basement, which was serving as his workshop at the time. He clubbed her in the head with a wooden plank and strangled her and did icky things, but I don't really want to talk about that. Before disposing of her body in the Willamette River, he dressed her in different women's clothing and took pictures of her, and eventually cut off her left foot to use to model his collection of women's shoes. So, yeah. He just had this left foot that he would put shoes on and take pictures of the foot with the shoes. He disposed of her body. I don't know if I should take the tape off of this. I think I'm going to do a second coat. Y'all, it's the thought that counts. So, disposed of her body in the Willamette River, which is going to be his go-to location for disposing of bodies. And then the second victim didn't happen until November 26th of the same year. So November 26, 1968, we have Jan Susan Whitney, who was 23. She was driving and her car broke down. And again, unfortunately for her, the person to come to her aid was Jerry. He offered to take her to his house, where he would then call a tow truck to come get her car that had broken down. When he got her into the car, he strangled her and took her back to his house. At this point, I believe he had moved his... I'm going to continue to call it a workshop because I don't have a better word for it. I believe he had moved out into the garage, and he had hooked up a pulley system, kind of what you would use. I'm assuming that he passed it off as being something you use for cars, like that you could hoist things with to fix them, is my guess. But also he wouldn't let people come in, so maybe he didn't have to hide it at all. He hoisted her from the pulley in his garage and left her there for several days after the murder. He dressed her up again, photographed the corpse before mutilating the body. This time, he cut off one of her breasts. His goal was to make a mold for one of the paperweights like he had in his home. And I don't know if he ever did, but that's what his end goal was for cutting off her breast. He disposed of her body in the Willamette River as well, so we have two bodies in the Willamette River. And while he was at it, he dumped Linda's left foot because it had started to rot. And by started to, I'm pretty sure it had to have been pretty rotten because he cut it off in January and it's November. I'm assuming it was not good. His third victim happened on March 27th of 1969. He abducted Karen Sprinker outside of a department store. And this time, he himself was dressed in women's clothing. It's thought that he went through, and I know this isn't how gender identity works, but he went through like a cross-dressing phase when he was committing these crimes, where he would dress in women's clothing and refer to himself as being a woman. Whether or not he actually thought he was a woman or identified as being a woman, I don't think, because it was a phase. So I'm assuming it wasn't actually his identity. I'm gonna go ahead and do the top black. Oh god. I think it's black. Yeah. Okay. Gotta open my paint. But he was dressed in women's clothing when he kidnapped her, and he brought her back to his house, and his garage, which is again where he committed most of his crimes. And he went on to rape her and forced her to model again his collection of women's clothing before he strangled her and hung her from the pulley again, after cutting off her breasts. We're back here at this breast cutting off thing. And he didn't keep her around. He didn't hold on to her body. Instead, he dumped it in the Willamette River. He attempted to abduct a couple of women on April 21st and April 22nd. On April 21st, he attempted to abduct Sharon Wood, and on April 22nd, he attempted to abduct Gloria Jean Smith, but he failed. I couldn't find a whole lot of information about them or like what caused him to fail. But I mean, good that he didn't get them. But his fourth and final murder happened the next day on April 23rd of 1969. He showed up to a shopping mall with, I don't know where he got it, but a fake police badge. And I guess he attempted to arrest this woman on the basis of having shoplifted. Her name was Linda Saley. She was 22 years old, and for whatever reason, she went with him. I don't know if he succeeded in convincing her that she was under arrest or if he just physically coerced her to go with him. Either way, she was taken to his garage, where she was tortured. She was raped, she was strangled, and he hung her from the pulley system and attempted to like send an electrical current through her body to make her jump. I'm not sure how he attempted to do that. I'm sure he had, since he was an electrician, he had different tools, but it didn't work. Which, I mean, is kind of good. At least he didn't get that. But he, again, fourth time, dumped her body in the Willamette River. So, at this time, we have 4 bodies in the Willamette River, and a foot also. Don't forget about the foot. So I don't know why he didn't choose an alternate location, but I guess that's just where he wanted to dump the bodies. In May of 1969, a man was out fishing on the Long Tom River, which is a river that is connected to the Willamette River. This man ended up finding the remains of Linda Salee while he was fishing. So the police began questioning about suspicious men, were led to Brudos, luckily. When they found him, that he gave them a fake address, which increased their suspicions, because if you're innocent, why would you give a fake address? They found him, but before they found him, they had located some of the copper wiring that had been used to tie up the body. And copper wiring is not something that everyone would have. It's generally going to be something that an electrically trained person would have, which also increased the suspicion. So Brudos ended up having some of the exact same wire in his garage, which allowed them to arrest him. He was arrested on May 30th of 1969, and he made a full confession. He confessed to all of the murders. On June 28th of 69, he pled guilty to 3 first-degree murder charges for the deaths of Karen Sprinker, Jan Susan Whitney, and Linda Salee. And he was sentenced to serve 3 consecutive life sentences in the Oregon State Penitentiary. He wasn't tried or convicted for Slauson's murder because there weren't photos like there were of the others. There were photos of her foot, because remember, this is the girl whose foot he had severed, but there weren't photos of the body. Not entirely sure what difference it makes. If her body was missing a foot, you would think that would be pretty good evidence, but I'm not a detective. In jail, Jerry had piles, stacks and stacks. Oh dear. Oh, this was not a good idea. There's like paint everywhere. Oy vey. Maybe I can fix it. In prison, Jerry had stacks of women's shoe catalogs. He would write companies asking them for shoe catalogs. And he said that they were his substitute for pornography. He filed countless appeals, but the parole board made it clear to him that he was never going to be released. He didn't have remorse. He didn't seem to realize that what he had done was wrong. So why would you let someone like that go? And that was their point. They didn't. So he died in jail from liver cancer while he was serving his sentence. He was the longest serving prisoner in the Oregon Department of Corrections, and he served a total of 37 years, which is not enough for all the people he killed, but at least he didn't get out of jail for free. So, I am going to attempt to finish this, and I will show you a picture of it when I am done. Okay, so it doesn't look good, but it's rustic. I could say it's rustic. I think it'll look better after I do another coat of each color. But there you have it. I never said I was good at crafts by any means. Okay, well, anyways, that's what I have. I'm going to put another coat on it when it's dry, and maybe it'll turn out. Otherwise, it was made with love, which is all that really matters, I think. And next month, I will be talking about Eileen Wuornos, who is just really disturbing. So, I will talk to y'all later. I hope you had a lovely holiday season, and I hope you have a good 2021.